Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. Ukraine War News Update, first part thereof for the 13th of February 2025. I've been scouring my usual sources to try and get up a normal hits and losses video. It's quite difficult at the moment because the bandwidth is being strangled by all sorts of stuff to do with the declarations from Trump and Hegseth yesterday, etc., etc. There's an awful lot of fallout, and then you come across news articles like this that in the fourth quarter of this year, the State Department is being slated to sign a contract for $400 million worth of Tesla armored vehicles, electric vehicles. And you're thinking, oh my goodness, the grift has started. It really has started. So like my blood pressure is boiling, but I can't find as much detail as I normally do about what's going on the front lines to do with the actual war in Ukraine. Nonetheless, let's get on with it. This is the Ukrainian General Staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. All the usual caveats apply, of course. You can find them in the description to the video below. 1,250 personnel lost is a pretty significant number. Not the largest we've seen by any stretch, but still considerably over 1,000. Then we have tanks, and a lot of tanks. 17 tanks. So every time I say, well, the Ukrainians are really hit the Russians a lot, that I think they just don't have the tanks they need to, and etc., etc. Then you get these weird spikes where suddenly 17 tanks are lost in a day. And now the question will be whether those are scare quotes tanks, or whether they are tracked garden sheds. Tanks that are really not functional as tanks and are co-opted to become APC's Mad Max style. So I don't know. And without Andrew Perpetua's loss list again, I think he's super busy. Again, he's saying the videos are absolutely stacked up, which would suggest there's a lot of activity going on along the front line still, even though some areas have really lessened, such as a Pokrovsk direction. But 17 tanks is a huge number. It's almost double the daily average. 23 troop carrying airfields is over the daily average, and 58 artillery systems, another huge day there, with that being almost 3 times the daily average. So some really significant numbers. 2 MLRS, multiple launch rocket systems, and 2 anti-aircraft warfare systems are useful numbers there. High numbers as we come to expect in the drone category. And then 168 vehicles and fuel tanks is a huge number too, with 2 pieces of special equipment. So very challenging day for the Russians, all things told. What footage is there to support some of this? Well, not a great deal coming out, to be fair, or at least not on the sources I usually peruse. Frontline reporters said that Russia's hurried counterattack in Kursk has turned into a disaster for them. So they have tried to hit the Ukrainians back, where the Ukrainians have countered in places like Cherkasskaya Konopelka. That's on the eastern side, round about Sujia, where they're trying to where the Ukrainians have been successful in sort of moving 4 to 5 kilometers into Russian territory. The Russian forces scrambled to reclaim that village, only to be obliterated, says the Euromaidan press, by Ukraine's drone and artillery barrage. So the Ukrainians holding the Russians off on their own counters. War Translated reports that Russian soldiers in the Kursk region are complaining about low quality fuel supplies for their equipment. The diesel is not only summer grade, but also diluted with water, which causes ice to form in it. The drone sanctions, says Dmitry from War Translated, are working. That's to say that the drone strikes on these hydrocarbon facilities, they are having an effect on the quality of the fuel that the Russians are getting along the front lines, and that is coming from a Russian source here, and you can see in that video and go and check that out. So I think that's an interesting data point. Now, here we have reported as a Russian assault group surrendering in a Pokrovsk direction. That's a good, I think, 9 soldiers there surrendering all at once, which is significant. If that sort of activity takes place more often than not, then that's good news for the Ukrainians. Okay, not too much other detail, and we're moving on to the distant strikes, and really not a lot of detail here, although I think some things have happened on both sides, no doubt. Right, a lot of politics this morning, says Tim White, and a lot of attack drones fired overnight by Russia. 137 out of the 140 were successfully stopped, with 85 being shot down conventionally. That's a really good success ratio. Only 3 out of 140 getting through. Damage was sustained in Odessa, Kharkiv. So Odessa area, the Russians have been attacking Reni, the port of Reni, which is on the Danube River last night. Lots of activity there. And that's also caused consternation in Moldova. As you can see here in the Kiev Independent, quote from Maya Sandu, the Moldovan president: "We cannot defend ourselves. Russian drones crash, explode in Moldova during an attack on Ukraine." Quote, "Russian drones and bombs are falling and exploding in our villages. We cannot defend ourselves against them." There were reports that 2 Russian drones have been found in the south by Moldovan police, one near Chumai in the Taraklia district, and the other exploded near Kadir Lunga. I don't know if that's a correct pronunciation. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs summoned the Russian ambassador. President Maya Sandu stated that Russia only sows terror. So there's been a lot of focus in that neck of the woods. Now, this has come out from the Kiev Independent. Let's actually go to the article. Good old Kiev Independent articles are nice and short. Russia's largest steel mill has reportedly been targeted by a massive Ukrainian drone strike. So Russia's Lipetsk Oblast came under a massive raid by drones on the night of the 13th. So that is last night, Regional Governor Artemonov said. The drones allegedly targeted the Novolipetsk Steel, NLMK, Russia's largest steel mill, which produces about 20% of the country's steel output, according to pro-Kremlin media outlet SHOT. This is very significant. I know that I've reported previously that why I think Elon Musk is very soft on Russia is because he takes a lot of natural resources from Russia. Takes steel, certainly used to take steel, I think, before the war. Sanctions are in place, but I think he is someone that is wanting, and I think still does, take natural resources from both Russia and, of course, China, steel being one of them. But hitting Russia's steel manufacturing infrastructure, I think, is incredibly important and will be fairly similar in impact to the attacks on hydrocarbon infrastructure. So this produced about 20% of the country's steel output, according to SHOT. The facility, located around 400 kilometers from the Russia-Ukrainian border, accounts for 80% of NLMK steel production and is a key asset of Russian billionaire Vladimir Lizin, the third richest Russian on the Forbes 2023 list. Following the overnight attack, power outages were reported in several districts of Lipetsk. Quote, "At the moment, power engineers are reconnecting consumers," the governor said. Debris from one of the downed drones reportedly fell on the Lipetsk aeration station, injuring an employee who was hospitalized with shrapnel wounds. Russia's defense ministry claimed air defense intercepted and destroyed 83 drones overnight. So if the Ukrainians sent 83 drones and they were all intercepted by the Russians, one can assume that they actually sent a lot more. And I'm hearing virtually nothing. Like, this is one of the only things I'm hearing. So there could have been a lot of activity inside Russia last night, with Ukraine being potentially very successful or maybe not successful. There's certainly some issues here for the steel mill. 37 out of the 83 were over Bryansk, 12 over Kursk and the Lipetsk Oblast, 9 over Tver, and 3 each over Belgorod, Kaluga, Smolensk and Voronezh. We'll wait to see if any further information emerges. Let's just see if there is anything in the socials as of now. I'll just try and update that. No, it's all about, almost everything at the moment is about, here is something. Okay, Anton Gerashenko says the modern radar systems were destroyed on the outskirts of Moscow, Defense Intelligence of Ukraine. A successful operation, so this is sabotage, by Ukrainian intelligence services destroyed 2 Valdai radar systems in Dolgoprudny, 18 kilometers from Moscow, on the night of February the 7th. An explosion took out the systems, which are among the first Valdais to be introduced into service of the Russian military. Wow, they were used in the air defense of Moscow against drone attacks. Goodness me, so that is pretty significant. And a success for the Ukrainians in their sabotage efforts. They seem to be doing a pretty good job with sabotage in terms of both assassinations and destruction of all sorts of things well into Russia. But not too much else on. I've already been down there on any strikes that took place overnight. So maybe more information will emerge today. Anton Gershchenko again says Russian strike has destroyed, this is a Russian strike on Ukraine, a humanitarian warehouse where pet food for homeless Ukrainian animals was stored, according to Happy Paw Foundation. The strike took place at night, so no one was injured. Quote, thousands of animals will be without food in the upcoming months, Happy Paw wrote. Medvedev commented on today's Russian strike, so this was yesterday, calling it peace through strength. Sometimes this concept really works, he wrote. Destroying pet food is what shows the true face of Russia. All living creatures in Ukraine deserve just and lasting peace and security from mad Russia and Russians. That's well said from Gershchenko there. Now, Lipetsk also... this I should have had earlier. Lipetsk tractor plant was attacked last night, so I don't know if this was anything to do with the steel mill or another target within Lipetsk, but local residents reported a series of explosions and power outages. So that's tractor plant question mark. I don't know if that's a tractor plant. Whether it's a tractor plant or the steel mill, but tractor plants are usually either euphemisms or literally are tractor plants that are being co-opted to produce military vehicles. So almost certainly if you hear tractor plant, it is a military vehicle production facility. Moving on now to other bits and pieces. And there's a lot to be said about what's going on within Ukraine politically. So Poroshenko, who is one of the biggest, I guess, political threats for Zelensky. He's the previous president, has previously been president, the fifth of Ukraine. He is looking like he's being accused of treason. I don't know if he's going to be impeached. On the same sheet. And so you can wonder whether this is a really politically motivated attack on a Zelensky opponent. But then that would be crazy to do that and for it to be solely politically motivated at a time when there's all sorts of scrutiny on Ukrainian politics. So, yeah, I don't know. On the same sheet, very unpopular figures of Kolomoisky, Bogolyubov, Zhivago and Medvedchuk, says Tim White. It's a transparent tactic, he says, by Zelensky's team to turn the public against Poroshenko. So that's Tim White's opinion. Yesterday, Poroshenko donated another load of military gear to Ukraine's frontline fighters. He remains very popular among the armed forces. Now the ex-president's been accused of helping Russia, and this is what the accusations are, by keeping chocolate factories open in Russia, buying coal from occupied Luhansk, etc., etc. So, and then linked to the Poroshenko news was this instance of Goncharenko, who is somewhat of a divisive Ukrainian politician. You might recognize him. He's quite recognizable. Jonathan Finks had some dealings with him, and actually, I don't think he speaks too highly of Goncharenko. But nonetheless, he's quite divisive and has been really critical of Zelensky and the kind of authoritarian nature of the present government. Complains there's no freedom, clutching the EU flag, and he says they don't still land in Europe, etc., etc. So there are some uncomfortable moments at the moment in the Verkhovna Rada in Ukraine as Poroshenko is possibly on the receiving end of some form of sanctioning, being accused of treason, but also some criticisms of Zelensky as well. We'll have to wait until more details of that come out. Now, Ilya Ponomarenko, talking about all the craziness of yesterday, I just thought the way he said goodnight last night kind of sums it up. I think the general mood. So I did that breaking news piece last night about what Trump's phone call with Putin about Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense at Ramstein. And also claims, surrounding this and the prison swap and all sorts of stuff. And I was really angry last night. I remain angry. I think my analysis was absolutely fair, spot on. And every analyst I'm reading at the moment pretty much is feeling the same. I haven't seen any decent analysis from anyone coming out and saying, well, that was good stuff from the US. The US has done a good thing there. Trump's been really strong. Trump's good job, Hexeth, etc., etc. Universally, everyone, and I'm not talking about like reading what Marjorie Taylor Greene thinks about stuff like this, but everyone has come out and is crapping themselves about the US's present positioning and calling on Europe to stand up and divest itself from American influence. So Ilya Ponomarenko last night pretty much summed it up. The light will prevail over the darkness. Life will triumph over death. And simple truth will defeat vile, poisonous lies. Good night from fighting Ukraine. There will be a new day and a new hope. And to me, that was like, that's what Ukrainians are thinking at the moment. There's a lot of people really, really hurt, thinking they've been betrayed, and then having to sort of rely on just hope and the idea that good will prevail, which, you know, you and I predominantly do as well. But we'd really like to be justified that actually in believing that Ukraine will prevail. Now, Mick Ryan has a short thread here. So a lot of this will be covered in my geopolitics video. But we do try and do a bit on peace plans in this section. A short thread summarising my new article. So Mick Ryan, the retired Australian general, on the current White House approach to peace in Ukraine. Peace plan article 1, we want our money back. Recent comments by Trump indicate that America wants its money back through rare earths. A couple of factual issues. First, the US has not provided hundreds of billions to Ukraine. And second, most of the aid it has provided has been spent in America. So all the stuff that we know. Peace plan article 2. They might be Russia one day. The Ukrainians have something to say about Trump's assertion here. There's a reason why Ukrainians voted for independence and have had two revolutions and stoutly resisted Russia's 2014 and 2022 invasions. And it implicitly endorses a Russian sphere of influence in Eastern Europe. I think Poland and the Baltics, to start with, will have opinions on this, as does Ukraine. But it will please Putin and Xi. It will please them a lot. In other words, Trump's positioning, Trump's rhetoric will please Putin and Xi Jinping. Peace plan article 3. No NATO for you, my friend. Hexeth made it clear that there would be no NATO membership for Ukraine. This has been a central pillar of Ukraine's position. Putin loves this because it's one of his core war aims, and America's giving it to him without any negotiation. So this is a lot of people are super angry about this. Now, interestingly, Biden had also said no to NATO accession, and then changed it slightly to say no to immediate NATO accession. Nonetheless, like, this has been a fairly consistent American position. It seems inopportune to start giving this stuff away just before the US is hoping to do negotiations. They're saying they're going to cede territory. They're not going to be any US troops in Ukraine, and there won't be Ukraine won't get into NATO. Well, you're just giving Putin exactly what he wants, literally what he wants. It's also that I saw another analysis. I don't know if he goes to talk about it here, but if Ukraine were to join NATO, it would be the cheapest way to stop this war. Honestly, it would be super cheap. Like NATO deterrence, you then got NATO in Ukraine. You can freeze the front lines or whatever, but NATO's in there and Russia won't attack again. There you go. And it would be much cheaper than continually throwing aid at Ukraine. Anyway, peace plan article 4. Europe, Ukraine is all yours. Europe, as in Europe, Ukraine is all yours. Hexeth made it clear that any security guarantee for Ukraine, as well as a peacekeeping force, would have to come from Europe, and that it could not be able to use NATO as cover for any Russian aggression. Peace plan article 5. The land that was yours is gone. This territorial concession from America also condemns millions of Ukrainians to live under Russian occupation. I mean, yeah, bad. Peace plan article 6. Ukraine, sit back and let the big boys talk. While Trump followed up his Putin call today with a call to Zelensky, there are signs that Trump wants to hash out an agreement directly with Putin and that Ukraine is only a bit player. Now, we hear from the Wall Street Journal that Xi Jinping wants to mediate negotiations, get this, between Trump and Putin without Zelensky. So they are seriously considering negotiating the future of Ukraine without Ukraine's input into those negotiations. It is absolutely unconscionable. It's like me going around to Doris's house next door, smashing up her house, and then saying, right, Doris, I'm going to have negotiations about your house with Derek, who lives 15 doors down the road. Derek, right, oh, actually, we're not going to have a conversation here. I'm going to go to Derek's, and we're going to work out how much of your house I'm going to get to keep. So you just stay here, because you're not going to have any say in how much of your house you get to keep. Because I don't really know why. Oh, because that would be fair. Oh yeah, and we don't want fairness. So see you later. This is absolutely insane. Yeah. Beyond Ukraine, says Mick Ryan, many of America's friends and allies will be watching with reactions that will extend from concern to something worse. If Trump can roll over to Putin's demands so easily, what will he do if the Baltics, Poland and Taiwan are attacked? It's an interesting negotiating strategy. The negotiation strategy appears to be give Russia whatever they want before they even ask for it. Just, he's the worst negotiator. Julia Davis says Ukraine lost. No, let's listen to what Trump has said, because this is incredible.
Do you see any future in which Ukraine returns to its pre-2014 borders?
Well, I think Pete said today that that's unlikely, right? It certainly would seem to be unlikely. They took a lot of land, and they fought for that land, and they lost a lot of soldiers. But it would just seem to me, and I'm not making an opinion on it, but I've read a lot on it, and a lot of people think that that's unlikely.
Do you see any?
Trump doesn't read, so he hasn't read a lot on it. Now, people are trying to work out what he's saying by this, because it looks like, so prima facie, looks like he's giving. He doesn't mention Ukrainian soldiers fighting for their land. He talks about Russian soldiers fighting and Russians losing many soldiers over fighting for that land. So, that's a bad thing. Julie Davis says Ukraine lost many soldiers and civilians while defending itself from the Russian invasion, but that doesn't seem important to Trump. Jane Kiev says Trump implies that since Russia fought for that land in Ukraine and lost a lot of soldiers doing it, those are quotes from him, that Russia should keep it. I can't remember a darker day for the democratic world. Now, it could be a misinterpretation of what Trump is saying here, and it could just be matter-of-factly talking about Russia losing a lot, and so therefore they're not going to want to, from their point of view, to concede that land that is already Ukraine. Anyway, the point that he's seeing everything from Russia's point of view and none of it from Ukraine's point of view tells you everything you need to know about Donald J. Trump and whose side he's on. And yeah, then there's this as well that's worth considering.
Support Zelensky ceding territory or exchanging territory in any agreement to end the war?
Well, he's going to have to do what he has to do, but, his poll numbers aren't particularly great, to put it mildly. He's got a country where, it's been savaged and attacked, and he's got an army that's been very, very brave, actually, despite the fact that, we've given him, in my opinion, $350 billion. That's what the real number is.
So now he's inflated the numbers up to $350 billion. It's just. So we're saying it's actually much larger. We give him $350 billion, and that his poll numbers are really bad, so he's going to have to cede territory.
Hear that number. And Europe has given, in my opinion, $100 billion. And they've done it in the form of a loan.
He's freezing out.
And there you have it.
President Zelensky of this process a bit. Isn't there a danger of that?
No, I don't think so. As long as he's there, but at some point you're going to have elections too. You're going to have an election.
None of this is looking good for Ukraine. As mentioned, China has proposed to host Trump-Putin talks without Ukraine's Zelensky. White House declined to confirm whether it had received China's proposal, but reportedly dismissed it as not viable at all, which is good news. Now, how whether what Trump has said is to the benefit of Ukraine or not is by looking at what's going on with the Russian propagandists, state TV, mill bloggers, etc., etc. And they seem to be rather happy. So, yeah, Russian propagandists seem to have been given a new agenda. Now they are in favour of negotiations. Remember, if Russia are wanting to go to negotiations, it's because it's in their best interest to do so. They will get the most out of it. They're in a lot of trouble or whatever. They will go to negotiations if last resort, or if it's very beneficial. I would suggest that they are starting to think it's very beneficial for them to go to negotiations because they will get maximal success in terms of their own objectives. It used to be the opposite not so long ago, says Gerashenko. Now the Russians are happy to go to negotiations, at least in some of these information spaces. Now, the question is, what's Europe going to do? So when the Enforcer's coming out and talking about this, I don't know, because the Enforcer's these are very pro-Ukraine as a YouTube channel, the Enforcer, but also very, very pro-Trump Republicans. But they say, breaking alert, at least 7 European countries have released a unified statement condemning the exclusion of Ukraine from peace talks with Russia. Those countries include France, Germany, Poland, Italy, Spain, the United Kingdom, and Ukraine. It's seen as like the Weimar Plus statement. So this is the statement. I'll read it all because it's short. We are ready to enhance our support for Ukraine. We are committed to its independence, sovereignty, and territorial integrity in the face of Russia's war of aggression. We share the goal to keep supporting Ukraine until a just, comprehensive and lasting peace is reached, a peace that guarantees the interest of Ukraine and our own. Right, this is massively different. So this is Europe's response, or some of Europe's response to Trump and Hegseth yesterday. They are saying that it needs to be a just peace, comprehensive, lasting, and in Ukraine's interests. We never hear that from the United States. We just need to stop this war. We need too many deaths. Zelensky's going to have to give up territory because he's not very popular, blah, 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 blah. Whereas Europe says it's in our interest and Ukraine's interest that they get a just, comprehensive and lasting peace, and a peace that is in their interests. We are looking forward to discussing the way ahead together with our American allies. Our shared objectives should be to put Ukraine in a position of strength. Of course, they should be. But from the US's point of view, not so much. Ukraine and Europe must be part of any negotiations. So not only Ukraine must be part of negotiations, bloody obviously, but also Europe. And I would agree with that wholeheartedly. Ukraine should be provided with strong security guarantees, yes. A just and lasting peace in Ukraine is a necessary condition for a strong transatlantic security. We recall that the security of the European continent is our common responsibility. We are therefore working together to strengthen our collective defence capabilities, and that's being put out there by a number of these, obviously states and information conduits. Here, the UK government is the exact same statement, but there seems to be some unity going on. Here's Kaja Kallas doing it as well. Anton Gerashenko says Ukraine and Europe must actively participate in peace negotiations, not merely be informed about the agreements. Peace can only be achieved through joint efforts together with the Ukraine and the Europeans. Does President Trump want to achieve peace for Ukraine? He wants to stop the war. He doesn't really care what happens to Ukraine. Kaja Kallas says, it's a former Estonian Prime Minister, Ukraine's independence and territorial integrity are unconditional. Yes, this is the kind of strength of rhetoric that we need. This is the correct thing, the moral thing to say. Our priority, you don't hear anything. Like, you tell me, you give me one example of Donald Trump coming out and putting Ukraine first, and coming out and saying Ukraine have been hard done by, this is what needs to happen for Ukraine, blah, 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 blah. Nothing he's ever said remotely looks like that. The most I've heard is what we just heard in the last one. Oh, they fought really bravely, the Ukrainian soldiers or whatever. Our priority must be strengthening Ukraine, putting Ukraine first here, and providing robust security guarantees. In any negotiation, Europe must have a central role. I bloody agree. Our Weimar Plus statement is here below. Absolutely on point there. The final thing to say, again, we are starting to see Europe realizing that I think the US have got it wrong here. The new US administration has already made concessions to Russia on Ukraine, even before peace negotiations have begun. And that is a claim of Oscar Pistorius, the German defense minister. Boris Pistorius, not Oscar Pistorius, bloody hell. Boris Pistorius, the German defense minister. Now, this is in line with Michael McFaul, the former ambassador to Russia, saying yesterday, as I showed you on my breaking news piece. So yeah, we might start to see Europe lift itself up here to be the primary defenders of Ukraine, and we might see the US take a backseat, but then the US won't want to take a backseat because Trump will want to get $500 billion worth of natural resources in back payment for assisting Ukraine. And that then means that Ukraine could become a political football between not only Putin and Trump, but Putin, Europe and Trump. And yeah, it's all really going off. So we'll have to wait and see how it all turns out. Anyway, that's enough from me. Take care, guys, and I'll speak to you soon.